There are no arguments about this. The Ford Ranger Raptor is very much the king of the hill. It's got the best suspension, it has the best off-road capabilities, it is arguably the boldest of all the pickup trucks on the market. However, when the Ranger Raptor was introduced in Malaysia, it was made available initially with a 3-litre V6, which hasn't deterred some buyers, but did raise the question about whether or not this is actually a truck or is it a toy. Now, responding to that, Ford Malaysia has introduced this, which is the Ford Ranger Raptor 2-litre bi-turbo diesel, which means you get the same engine up front from the rest of the Ranger lineup, but you still get most of the goodies that you get from the full-fat V6 Raptor. So is this a compromise, or is this actually the sweet spot? My name is ABDULLAH, this is MalaysianMotoring, this is our review of the 2023 Ford Ranger Raptor Diesel. Now, externally, between the diesel and petrol Raptors, there is no difference, which means you get the full Ford script up front with this very wide, very distinctive front grille. You get the C-clamp full LED daytime running lights and full LED headlights replete with performance LEDs, which means these are adaptive beams. So high beam can be on, it'll just black out points wherever there are other vehicles. You also get LED fog lights, which I found to be rather useful in the week or so I've had this car. The other thing that you'll find standard on this are the wheels. So these are 17-inch alloy wheels wrapped in BF Goodrich all-terrain tires, which actually provide pretty good on-road performance, which is great given the fact that this has one of the best suspension setups of any truck currently available on the market. Raptor details include flared arches replete with these bumper or wheel arch guards, as well as these vents up here and vents down the side. Now on the V6, it actually says V6 down here. On this car, it says nothing. But it's from here, I think, where the Raptor kind of looks its best, because this is where you will notice the biggest difference over a Raptor versus the rest of the Ranger lineup. Thanks to those bigger wheels and the upgraded suspension system, which includes Fox shock absorbers front and rear, this Raptor sits actually a little bit higher than the regular Ranger models. It's also a little bit wider thanks to those flared wheel arches. As standard, you get this metal step down here, but you do not get roof rails, which means if you want those, you'll have to pay extra. You also do not get a sports bar back here. Again, if you want that, you'll have to pay extra. That said, this sticker pack is standard, as is this paint, which I know that some customers do quite like, because this is apparently the very trendy color right now. That's why you can find this sort of flat grey on lots of other brands. But if you ask me, the Ranger Raptor looks best in orange or blue. Now back here, you will find the same taillights as you do on the Ranger Wildtrak, but you will find a slightly different bumper, which looks a little bit more rugged and also has exposed towing hooks down here. Of course, you get the Raptor badging over there and the biggest Ford logo I've ever seen, which also hides the camera here. Now, talking about cameras, this car comes as standard with a 360-degree camera system, which is excellent because, as I mentioned, this truck is huge. Now, popping the tailgate, you will find that this is not an assisted open tailgate, which means, if you'll excuse the noise, it falls rather ungracefully. However, there is a little spring-loaded mechanism down here, which means closing it is at least very light. Now, behind this tailgate, you will find a pretty standard load bay. This is a pretty similar size, although the overall weight capacity on this is a little bit lower, owing to the fact this truck rides on multi-link rear suspension rather than leaf springs like the rest of the Ranger lineup. However, Raptor owners very rarely haul things in the back anyway, which means whatever capacity it does have is going to be pretty good as standard. Notable items in here include a 3-pin socket as well as a 12-volt socket back here, which means that with the truck running, you can actually use as a pretty good workbench, replete with these clamps here, which allow you to clamp things on should you need to, I don't know, cut something or whatever. There are also very handy little screw points up here along this particular panel, which means if you want to put a cover or a canopy over this, it should be quite easy to install. That said, however, Vehicles like the Peugeot Landtrek and Toyota Hilux all offer bed lights, which is something that this truck does not offer. On top of that, the third stop lamp is mounted here rather than up there on the roof, which means that if you should have to drive around with the tailgate down, if you have, for example, an oversized load, you're losing the third brake light. I'm actually not sure what the legal implications are of that, but I'm pretty sure they're not that nice. What is nice, however, is this interior, because although a lot of it is shared with the regular Ranger, quite a number of things have been updated ever so slightly to give it the Raptor feel. One of those things is the steering wheel, because it is now wrapped in black leather with red contrast stitching, and it has metal paddle shifters on the back which move with a very nice reassuring action. You also get Raptor script down here. You get red accents around the aircon vents, like a Proto Myvi. You also get updated seats which come with leather as well as microfiber along the side and in the center to give you a little bit more grip, and it looks pretty good as well. These seats also are Raptor branded because heaven forbid you should forget. The Raptor branding continues on the floor mats, and the door sills on this car come with Ford Performance written on them. Again, to highlight the fact this is not a regular Ranger. That said, the regular Ranger practicality elements are still here. So you get an upper glove box here, a lower glove box here. You get a couple of very large cup holders with these indentations to help hold your drinks. You get a French fry holder here, which I use for my access cards. You get a wireless charging pad here with a USB-A and USB-C port, very useful for the Android Auto should you want it, although this system does also offer it as a wireless system too. All the buttons here are all very logically laid out, with the ones on the left running the ADAS system, the ones on the right running the instrument cluster, and the ones on the bottom running the media system. So again, everything is very practical indeed. You also get more cup holders sat in front of the front aircon vents should you want to keep your drinks cool. All the buttons here are very nice. You get electrically adjustable front seats. However, the seats in this car do not come with memory functionality nor ventilation. Now, ventilation is something that I highlight because it is very, very useful on a hot day, but we don't get that here. What we do get are 6 auxiliary switches up here. Should you want to use any external accessories, you can mount them onto these and run the power directly from the car, which means switching them on and off are very easy indeed. This is very good should you have things like a powered roller shutter for the boot, or you have a light bar either on the roof or on the front bumper. Now we move on to technology, because this car certainly has a lot of it. You have a electronic gear selector here, which does this really funky thing where if you switch off the truck, it goes from D to P automatically. It moves like it's got a ghost in it. You also have the drive mode selector here, which I'll get to in a moment, but most importantly, you have Ford's sync system. Now, this infotainment system is easily one of the best I have ever seen. Not just because it is displayed on this massive screen, but also because it's just executed really well. All of the buttons and switches here work very well. This is for your HVAC controls. It means you never have to touch things on the screen. However, there are actually on-screen buttons here, again, to make it look rather nice, and it is integrated very neatly. If you're running Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, it displays on the top portion of the screen, the top 2/3 of the screen, in a very pleasing manner, and everything falls very easily to hand. With this seat set up in my driving position, you will find that everything is very easy to touch and very easy to reach, and everything is very easy to manipulate. The same can be said of this instrument cluster, because again, all the buttons are here. On top of that, the displays here are very clear and very concise. There's not a lot of customizability, but you get all the information that you want, including things like your angle, including things like your engine speed, etc., your instant fuel economy, as well as your transmission temperature, your engine temperature, your battery readout, and of course, naturally, your fuel, which in this car does run out quite quickly. Now, in terms of this system here, if you were to ask me, this is perhaps one of the best digital instrument clusters on any truck that you can get right now. But there are a few issues to me. Number one, if you're using this car's level 2 semi-autonomy systems, you will notice that the readouts for the various systems are quite small. If you don't know what you're looking for, it's very easy for you to miss. That could have been aided by a heads-up display, which unfortunately is not available in our market, because at least then you could get the most pertinent information displayed to you up here rather than down here. The other thing that I've come to notice is that these buttons on the steering wheel are not necessarily the best quality. They certainly feel very nice, but there have been 2 or 3 occasions where I've input something here and it didn't really register into the car, because you really have to jam your finger into the buttons in order to ensure that any input is registered by the vehicle. That is ever so slightly annoying. But aside from that, everything in here has been quite pleasant. That has most certainly been aided by the standard Bang & Olufsen audio system, which is excellent. And this continues in the back where, with this seat set up in my driving position, I have very, very good knee room and pretty good headroom as well. The backs of the front seats are even scalloped, so should there be a taller driver up ahead, you can still find plenty of space to put your knees, and the front seats are mounted quite high, so you can tuck your feet in underneath quite easily. These seats are particularly of note as well because the seat squabs are nice and long, which means I have very good under thigh support. The recline angle is not bad, better than some other trucks, and I still get the same leather and microfiber upholstery back here, replete with the red inserts to make it feel a little bit more racy. I have a couple of aircon vents here, a USB-C and USB-A socket, and most importantly, I also have a 3-pin household socket, which means I could theoretically charge my laptop back here and do a little bit of work. This is particularly useful for people who use their trucks for work, because workmen will need access to power on the go, and the Ranger Raptor is more than happy to deliver. Now, what I'm trying to demonstrate to you here is a problem that I've had with this truck, which is the fact that the center armrest doesn't just have a pull, it actually has a mechanical release. Now, if you're not careful with the angle, this can be quite difficult to deploy. And once you do get it down, you'll realize it is not only very short and very small, which I know some people don't appreciate, but also the cup holders themselves are relatively small, which means you can probably only get maybe smaller tins in here. Bottles can very easily go in the doors, sure, but this would have been nicer as a cup holder. And on top of that, this little cubby here, which would be useful to put smaller items like, say, a mobile phone, can't be used because this is the door latch release. Slightly irritating. At least the rear windows go down all the way, which I certainly appreciate. Now, world's noisiest window regulator. Now, of course, the Ranger Raptor isn't necessarily about carrying rear passengers or whether or not the size of its cup holders are adequate and satisfying. The bigger question with the Raptor and where the satisfaction is actually delivered is in the way it drives, because the Raptor is something else. The fantastical thing about the Ford Ranger Raptor is that it does very much drive like a car. So underneath the skin, you will find a set of Fox shocks with a standard suspension setup on the front, uprated naturally, and a multi-link suspension at the rear. Now, the only other pickup to offer this sort of suspension setup is the Nissan Navara, which is also known for having a particularly supple and comfortable ride. And from behind the wheel, aside from this very heavy steering, which is in line with what you'd expect from a pickup truck, and it is quite reassuring in that sense, given the fact that you are ultimately piloting a very large, very wide, very heavy machine, it feels like a car. It rides like a car, it drives like a car. So over primary and secondary lumps and bumps, it soaks up the worst of it pretty well, although it is a little bit on the firm side. But in terms of secondary undulations, this car rides very smoothly, and it settles down very quickly as well, which means that even though this is a pickup truck and it feels like a pickup truck, it looks like a pickup truck, the driving experience is very much like a car. And so if you're looking for a car-like experience in a truck, seriously, look no further. The other particularly strong point in this car is in terms of technology, specifically in terms of active safety. So the Ranger Raptor in Malaysia comes as standard with level 2 semi-autonomy. So that means you have radar-guided cruise control, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, safe exit warning, as well as, like I've mentioned, that fantastic 360-degree camera. And when you put all of that together, ultimately what you get is a truck that's very easy to live with. In fact, I'd argue that it is easier to live with one of these than anything else on the market. Aiding that is that engine that I mentioned earlier. So as I said, this is the same 2-liter bi-turbo diesel that we've seen in other Ranger models. It has not been uprated, it has not been up-tuned. Ford says that this is in order to ensure better reliability and durability, because that is obviously the name of the game in trucks like these. And so with its ability to run up to B20 biodiesel, should that be the only thing available in whichever kampong you might be in, or whichever field or farm you might work in, it means that, again, this is a truck that you can rely on, that you can use every day. And based on our experience with a little bit of off-roading, you can check out our video of that up here, this is clearly a truck that has not compromised on-road ability for off-road capability. And as a result, again, it just makes it really easy to live with. There are some downsides, however. Firstly, because naturally the Ranger Raptor runs on high-performance all-terrain tires, it does mean that it does hamper fuel economy slightly. So even though this is easily one of the most efficient engines in the range, in the variety of pickups you can get out there, sans obviously the 1.9 litre that you can get in the Mazda BT50 and the Isuzu D-Max, we're still getting about 10.3 litres per 100 kilometers. Now, this same engine in the Ford Everest was doing a little over 8.5, about 9-ish thereabouts on mixed use. And bear in mind, we have not exactly been wringing the neck out of this truck, mostly because we're terrified of its size and its weight. And then there is the matter of refinement. So again, it goes back to those tires. It goes back to the fact that this is still ultimately a truck. So you have these huge wing mirrors, you have a very bluff front end. There's not really a lot that can be done in terms of aerodynamics, which means in terms of wind noise, it is a little bit high. In terms of road noise also, there's a little bit more intrusion into the cabin than you might necessarily expect, particularly if you're moving in from, say, a luxury or even a mass market SUV for that matter. But that is certainly not all bad news. If you ask me, in terms of NVH, other trucks do worse. In fact, this truck's main rival would most likely be the Toyota Hilux GR Sport. And even with its road bias tires and its slightly lower ride height, NVH is broadly the same. And I'd argue that the Raptor, even with the all-terrain tires, is still better to drive on-road, let alone off-road. On top of that, where the Rogue uses a 2.8 litre turbo diesel, this is just a 2 litre, which means your road tax is cheaper, which means your fuel consumption is better. And that 10-speed automatic gearbox is really smooth. These metal gear paddles or gear shifters back here, although they feel very nice and they're very nice to use, ultimately I haven't really used them because there's no need for it. The 10-speed auto box in this car is so adept at keeping this car at just the right ratio that there's never really been a need to call on the gear shift paddles. So when you put all of that together, what you end up with, this is the best truck on-road and off-road. And ultimately, that is what goes to justify its near ~250,000 price tag. Yes, this is significantly more expensive than anything else that you can get from Japanese makes. And again, that does mean that you have to bear in mind about whether or not you'll really be using this truck for everything that it's worth. Because in our experience, the Ford Ranger Wildtrak is about 9/10 this car, the XLT Plus about 8 or 7/10 of this car, which means you don't really need a Raptor to enjoy all the benefits of driving a Ranger. On top of that, what the Ford Ranger offers uniquely, any Ranger for that matter, is the ability to experience Ford Ranger experiences or Ford Ranger getaways, where Ford will organize various events for Ford Ranger customers to come and connect and socialize and enjoy their Ford Rangers to the absolute limit. That could be on-road, that could be off-road, and you can be assured of activities that are fun for the whole family. And this social aspect is something that I find that a lot of Malaysians appreciate very much, and it is something that Ford is certainly capitalizing on because they understand that their customers are a particularly enthusiastic bunch. So what does that mean? Well, if you're looking for the ultimate pickup without compromise, this is most likely it. This turbo diesel pairing with this suspension setup, this interior, and this specification is absolutely spot on. As someone who does not like pickup trucks, I've come to really enjoy my time in the Ford Ranger Raptor. If anything, I'm now curious about the 3-litre V6 because I understand that that has to be considered more as a toy rather than a work truck that is actually fun. And hopefully we'll be able to get that very soon, although I have a sneaking suspicion that we might not. And on top of that, it does make me consider other trucks within the Ranger lineup, and we certainly look forward to bringing those reviews to you very soon. But if you're looking for greater value within this segment, then please consider the Isuzu D-Max and the Mazda BT50, which is ultimately the same truck underneath, because both of those vehicles offer bulletproof reliability, pretty decent NVH, and ride quality for significantly less than the Ford Ranger. And if you're looking at vehicles, especially in East Malaysia, you may want to consider the Toyota Hilux, because although that is a truck that is compromised in many ways, regardless of where in the lineup you purchase, it's still really well known for its reliability, and it's really well known for its service network and parts availability, especially down in East Malaysia. So if that is a consideration, then that might be it. But if you want the ultimate statement in lifestyle pickups, if you want a pickup that is the least pickup-like out there, and you want to enjoy the level of performance, capability, durability, and tractability, then the Ford Ranger Raptor is truly like nothing else. I certainly look forward to driving the Raptor V6 Petrol in due course, as well as the rest of the Ranger lineup, because I suspect they are going to impress me about as much as this car. But in any case, that has been our review of the 2023 Ford Ranger Raptor bi-turbo diesel. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to be notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, and jangan bodoh.